Good afternoon to everybody. We want to first of all wish and to thank also Dr. Bernie and Marcia Klein for sponsoring the Dvar Torah. It's Le'ilu Nishmat, their father, Louis Klein, Eliezer Ben Yaakov, that his neshama should have Aliyah Began Eden. It's an interesting name, your father, Eliezer Ben Yaakov. That's the name of one of the Tanaim in the Gemara, no less. So, Be'emet that he should have an Aliyah in Gan Eden. In this week's Parsha of Parshat Shemini, I'd like to connect the one aspect, the inyan of busha, of shame, with the inyanim of the events that occurred over now, the Yom HaShoah and Yom HaZikaron, and also Yom HaAtzmaut. So start off with the inyanim of Aaron, that the Torah tells us that on the 8th day, which was the culmination of the 7 days of preparation for the inauguration of the Mishkan, so Moshe comes to Aaron, his brother, and he says to him, look, today there's after you bring a korban, there's going to God's Shekhinah, His divine presence is going to rest over here in the Mishkan. So draw near to your korban and bring it. Rashi says that the reason that he needed the cajoling of Moshe, his brother, was because Aaron hesitated, and the reason that he hesitated because he had to bring a golden calf as a kapara and atonement for Chet HaEgel, and he knew how much of an integral role he had in the Chet HaEgel, so therefore he was bashful, he was ashamed of his role, and therefore he hesitated. So Moshe told him, look, this is exactly precisely why you were chosen, and therefore bring the korban. And Rabbi Hollander in his Sefer Zevach Mishpacha, he gives a very interesting pshat. He says that when Moshe said to his brother Aaron, you know what, I see that you're embarrassed, but this is why you were chosen. He interprets it, you were chosen because you're a man who is embarrassed. What does that mean? It means, like the Rambam says, that, first of all, before I quote the Rambam, the Gemara says, in fact, that's one of the features of the Jewish people. What typifies the Jewish people is they've got a sense of shame. And by shanim rachmanim gomlei chasadim, the basic sort of characteristic. So the Rambam explains that when a person's got shame, that means that it shows that the neshama is, so to speak, operating properly. Because the sense of shame is that when the neshama meets with the divine creator, with the infinite, so when the finite and the infinite meet, the person feels that the neshama feels that it's such like a speck, it's like a nothing compared to Hashem. So a person feels a sense of awe, a feels of reticent, a feeling of withdrawal and smallness, and that's a sense of shame. So shame is then an indication that when the person is meeting up with the truth, then he feels like uncomfortable in the sense that he is just like a very small compared to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On the other hand, in the very same parasha over here, Parshat Shemini, the Torah tells us that after the tragedy of when Aaron lost 2 of his sons, so Moshe said to him, I know that you're in mourning, but why don't you bring certain korban? Why don't you eat the korban, one of the sacrifices which had to be done in that inauguration of the Mishkan? It's a Seir Shel Rosh Chodesh. And Aaron says to Moshe, but how can I eat that particular sacrifice? I'm in a state of mourning, and a person who's in a state of mourning cannot eat holy food. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, yeah, you know what, Aaron, my brother, you're correct. Really, Hashem told me to eat, that you should eat, to instruct you to eat other korbanot, but that korban of the Seir Rosh Chodesh, Be'emet, he told me that you shouldn't, that's not to be eaten. And so here, the Rashi says that Moshe had the opposite reaction to shame. In other words, that he wasn't ashamed to admit that he did wrong. In fact, the Targum Yonatan says something, it's mind-blowing. what Moshe did was that he put out a proclamation and he sent to everyone in Klal Yisrael that, you know what, on this day there was this terrible tragedy, and I wanted my brother to eat of a certain korban, even though he's in a state of mourning. And my brother Aaron corrected me, and he is correct, and I forgot what HaKadosh Baruch Hu had told me, and Moshe and Aaron corrected me. So you see over here, not only did they admit between him and between Aaron, he sent a proclamation to the whole of Am Yisrael about his mistake and how Aaron is correct. So we have like a paradox when it comes to shame. On the one hand, you've got the shame being a realization that one is standing in the presence of something greater. That's like Aaron. On the other hand, Moshe Rabbeinu, because he's standing before someone who is greater, before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that demands the truth, and the truth has to now overcome, so to speak, the shame, and he has to correct now and not give any impressions whatsoever that maybe there was room for what he said. So he had to now, in the name of truth, he had to say, yes, Hashem gave me the Torah like this, I made a mistake, and Aaron corrected me. So basically then, what we're saying is that the shame is the relationship to truth and shame is that when a person is confronted with the truth, so then yes, he's very relaxed because that's the truth, that's the emet, but he feels a certain recoiling because he feels that compared to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's small. But the truth also, right? It's exactly this paradox that the truth also demands that in the name of the truth, when there's a mistake, that a person overcomes his sense of shame and he proclaims the truth. And that's actually the first law of the Shulchan Aruch. The first law in Shulchan Aruch, which the Ramah said, which the Shulchan Aruch starts off, is that a person has to rise up in the morning like a lion, and then it also adds on that a person should have shame, but he shouldn't be ashamed of those people who ridicule him in doing Torah mitzvot. Otherwise, we can't do Torah mitzvot. So this is like a inyan in and of itself, the great value of shame. But I'd like to maybe connect it also with the events. The zodiacal sign of Nisan is a sheep, and the zodiacal sign of the month of Iyar is a bull. The Jewish people were always sensed a sense of good shame, but also there was also maybe excessive shame. And that's what was in the month of Nisan, where we commemorate this whole inyan of the Shoah, even though the Rabbanut Harashit originally wanted that it shouldn't mar Pesach, but it should be observed on the 10th of Tevet, right? Asara b'Tevet, that's the Yom HaKadosh HaKlali. And then, but on the other hand, you've got them moving from the zodiacal sign of a sheep, people being led, slaughtered to the sheep, or following on the positive side, Hashem, are into the Midbar like sheep, right, at the time of Yetz Mitzrayim, or killing the Egyptian god of the sheep. But then we move to Iyar, and Iyar is a bull. Iyar is a bull. A bull is bold. It's more aggressive. We moved from the events of Nisan to the event of Niyar, on where the bull, so to speak, not like a bull like in a china shop, but a bull in the boldness and aggressiveness, in that the Jewish people now come back to the center stage of history, in the sense now that we move forward with all the boldness of a bull, that we are not shy, that we overcome, that Be'ezrat Hashem, this mahalach, this development from going from sheep to, which shows our sheep the dedication of following Hashem into the Midbar, but they're not only following, but leading. and that Be'ezrat Hashem, that all the forces now of Torah, as we march on from one Yom Ha'atzmaut to the next, so all the values of the Torah ultimately are going to be realized in the time of Mashiach. One can delay, one can be a little bit hesitant, but that's what's going to happen. And Be'ezrat Hashem, so these two features of a sheep and a bull, of Aaron and Moshe, they are always merged together to bring about a total harmony and shleimut of the Jewish people. So Shabbat Shalom lekulchem, Shabbat Shalom to all of you, and Be'ezrat Hashem, have Chag Sameach on the coming Yom Ha'atzmaut. Kol Tov.